In Galatians chapter 1, verses 18 through 20, we read this. Then after 3 years I went up to Jerusalem to see Peter and abode with him 15 days. But other of the apostles I saw none, save James, the Lord's brother. Now the things which I write unto you, behold, before God I lie not. Paul again here is affirming his authority to bring this message of the gospel in this letter to the churches in Galatia. In military operations, espionage is often used to combat the opposition. In World War II, the German army dressed soldiers in United States Army uniforms to confuse and disrupt the Allied forces in combat operations. And in many cases, this disruption worked. When I served in the mid-70s, we had various codes and passwords that came down from higher headquarters to prevent such a possibility. Every person was given the appropriate information so there would be no confusion. I remember on one exercise during the Army Ranger training, I had an experience that demonstrated the importance of this. We were given a challenge and a password, and I was on watch in a night defensive position. All of a sudden, I heard the rustling of brush in front of my position. I gave the challenge, "Halt, who goes there?" Before I could get out the password, I heard a response, and I will leave out the expletive that was said. I discovered it was our platoon leader who had somehow inadvertently walked through our defensive line into the hostile side of our line. If I hadn't recognized him, I was to open fire, which would have been a disaster if it was in a real combat situation, and it would have significantly probably caused the failure of that patrol for our platoon leader if I'd done so. And so we followed the right procedures, and everything was quiet on the front, so to speak. In a similar way, it was vital for Paul to be recognized as a minister who would bring the truth to the churches. The churches in Galatia had been inundated with impostors who claimed to be from Jerusalem and who claimed the apostolic authority of the leaders there. Paul put himself under oath that he had met both Peter and James, two prominent leaders in the Jerusalem church. This claim would mean several things to those receiving the letter. First, that the connection and affirmation of the apostolic leaders was true, that Paul had a real connection with them. Second, by having this affirmation, the readers of the letter would know that his theology was in agreement with the Jerusalem leaders. Now, this is a major point because Paul was combating a group of false teachers who are infiltrating the churches. They were claiming that works were necessary for salvation. This was clearly an unorthodox theological view that they were preaching, but they were quite plausible in their arguments, considering where they came from, and they claimed that they had this understanding from the Jerusalem church. To combat this, Paul indicated that he received his theological understanding from the Lord directly, and that his relationship with the Jerusalem leaders was validated the orthodoxy of his teaching. Well, historically, there have been myriads of teachers who have come on the scene with what they say are new revelations of truth. They come stating that the Lord revealed this or that to them. The problem is this: how do we know if their new revelation is true? First, we must be very, very careful regarding such teachers. One of the marks of a cult is that the cult will present a new teaching that contrasts historical Orthodox theology and divides believers. Such a teacher will declare that he is the only one who has correctly understood a critical point of theology. Moreover, he will indicate that anyone who disagrees is missing the mark with God. How do we combat such a problem today? Well, first, as believers, we must be cautious when hearing something that departs from the orthodox views held throughout the centuries of church history. Second, we must seek the truth from Scripture, which is the only reliable source of theological truth. And third, We ought to discuss these new ideas with credible pastors and theologians that we know. In short, just to get their viewpoint and let them expound the scriptures and the truth of the theology that we perhaps do not fully comprehend ourselves at the moment. So in short, do not be quick to chase opinions of teachers who bring new unorthodox ideas to the table. You see, the church needs to maintain a united front. That is, that professing Christians stand together on the truth of the gospel. It's important because we are actually in a spiritual combat, and the church needs to hold to a solid teaching that we proclaim to the nations.